All right, welcome back to the Iron Sights podcast. I'm here with Raphael, Red Hat Slow Gats on Instagram. Maybe you heard of him. Welcome to the show, dude.
Thank you for having me.
I'm stoked to have you. We got connected last summer.
Yes.
On the range. There was some guys that I work closely with. The In Extremis Performance crew were running a course. And we were out there for 3 days, and you were out there with us. And I got the opportunity to watch you in action. And I knew about you, but I didn't recognize you when I saw you. Somebody had to put those pieces together for me. But clearly, that was not your first rodeo moving and shooting as compared to, a large amount of the group. And there's always a spectrum, right, of, people coming in. And the questions that you were asking were very detailed. And I really appreciated that. And I was kind of watching you operate, take it in, practice it, do more reps. And then we got to have a few on the side conversations. And I was like, we should put this dude on the show. But you're also an active law enforcement officer, and that can be a challenge getting guys onto the show that are active. And I saw you pop up on another podcast, the Trigger Talks podcast. And I was like, wait, this guy's allowed to actually do a podcast? So I reached out immediately. I was like, dude, we got to make this happen. So you made the drive down for me today, and I appreciate that, man. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm super flattered to be here. So thank you.
Well, I'm honored that you're here. And it's, I'm always grateful when guys want to spend time and chat or talk shop. You have we're going to talk about this, but you got a little bit of a unique perspective, which is why I wanted to get into this and I'll let you obviously go through your bio here a little bit. But the way I want to kind of handle this is, let's just talk about you a little bit about your shooting journey. Kind of what you've done in your career in law enforcement, what you're currently doing now. And then we can kind of break out into a few areas, a few topics that I kind of want to dig into with you, because you are literally in it right now. You're not a guy that did it and has an opinion about how it should be now. You've been doing it long enough to where I think, you probably learned a few things along the way.
Right.
You had some insights, and then you kind of saw some realities. But you've also been very influential at your agency, I think, in a lot of ways. And the fact that you are as competitive as you are outside of that in shooting, I recently just saw that you were at an LEO only competition down in Southern California. I think it's at Prado. Is that where it was?
Yes, yeah.
And you cleaned up, and
yeah,
you did really well. And so I think that I want to talk about that too, in that experience, because I'm seeing a lot of that happen. So I got a lot to talk to you about, man.
All right. Let's do it.
Well, let's talk about you. Let's let you talk about you, and just kind of give us a little bit of a background on you, give people some insights as to who you are, so who they're listening to if they don't already know about you.
Sure. So active law enforcement, police officer. I'm going on about 17 years now. So when I started when I was pretty young. I started my career in a smaller agency here in the Bay Area, and I did about 3.5 years there. And then decided it was time to move on, and I wanted more opportunity. So I joined a now larger agency, one of the bigger ones here in Northern California. And that's pretty much where I've been for the last, I guess that would be almost 15 years now.
Okay.
And, just did my patrol and normal police officer duties. And in the last couple of years, I finally made it to our full-time range staff. So that's now my primary job on a daily basis, is just pretty much handling range, firearms training, anything related to that.
Okay. So, patrol cop for 98% of this time.
Pretty much. Yeah.
So dealing with the citizens of Northern California in a major metropolitan city, right? Okay. So you've had a lot of experience hands-on talking with all types of different folks, including obviously employees of that agency. I've seen you and I say this a lot, just like the State Farm commercial goes, you know a few things because you've seen a few things. And then you move into this kind of, do you call this, or do we refer to this as like a special assignment, or is it, how do we refer to that?
It would be a special assignment.
Okay.
Especially since I guess it would be more administrative, right? And it's a full-time, that's what you do. That's your job.
Who are you working with?
So primarily there's about a dozen of us. So we're all firearms instructors, and that's all our duties. Some, have been around for a little bit, and then some are a little bit newer than me, like me. So my coworker, who I would say is the other half of the Red Hat Slow Gats, he got to the unit the same time as I did. And I think that's what sparked ourselves to better ourselves as well as like motivate other people to do, become better at shooting essentially.
Got it. Seems like a pretty good gig.
It's you know what it is. It is. I think sometimes you forget how lucky you can be sometimes.
I can appreciate that. Yeah. Let's talk just real quick to give some people some perspective. How many officers, sworn officers, are on this agency?
I think we're hovering around 2,000 right now.
So the reason I asked that, and I already knew the answer to that, but the reason I asked that is to give people perspective on kind of what you're dealing with. For those people that are on the inside, the average agency in the country is like 20 or less officers on it, right?
Some of them, yeah. So my first agency was about 30.
Yeah. So this is a very large agency in comparison. When you look at, so when we're, I just want to give that context to people when we're talking about kind of some of the things you're doing. And when you talk about government, you talk about agencies and how slow things can go, and how I guess like previous generational stuff gets embedded, and how you approach the culture of that, and then obviously the administrative aspects of that, and then the influencing of that. It's similar but different, I think, has been my experience in talking with folks like you, just kind of where they're coming from. That's not to say that it's easier in a smaller agency, but you've got a full-time job doing this now, so maybe that gives you a little bit of an advantage in terms of getting some things done more on a consistent basis. Okay, but the people you're working with this is not an advanced training unit that you're working for, where you're teaching vehicle stuff, room clearing stuff, defensive tactics, any of that kind of stuff. This is strictly basic firearms training.
And I think that's one of the unique things about my job and my role in the department is that it's a special assignment, and that's the specialty, is just firearms. So to me, the way I look at it, my job is to just make people better at shooting guns and developing their skills. That's it.
Then anything that they might be doing from the tactics perspective or anything else that involves shooting, you hope that you've given them the things that they need in order to then get that learning or that teaching and apply it appropriately. Got it. Okay. So, and you've been doing this for 2 years?
I would say, yeah, just over 2 years now.
Right on. All right. At the same time, we mentioned the competitive thing, right? Or the competition shooting. Let's go back. When did competition shooting start for you?
So I remember my first, I think I picked it up around, I want to say about 2013.
Okay.
Maybe 2014, that time. And I'll tell you, it started because I was a patrol officer. I thought I was a good shooter. And I decided, hey, let me try out one of these law enforcement matches. And so I signed up thinking, yeah, I'll probably clean up. And then sure enough, I think I finished in like the bottom third, bottom quarter.
Surprise.
And I realized then, I go, hey, I'm not as good as I thought that I was. And so from there, it kind of developed the drive of like, hey, I want to get better. I want to understand, how do I become better at shooting? And so from there, I started picking up the USPSA stuff, jumping pretty much right into it. And like my personality is I find something like a hobby or something, I'm
all in.
Mm-hmm. And so it's exactly what happened with competitive shooting is I started it. I was like, hey, this is fun. But also I looked at it as this is training. This is time behind the gun. And I started doing it a lot. And it did. It become part of the lifestyle, I guess, where you just like shoot matches almost every weekend and traveling to go do bigger matches and hanging out with all the other guys. But for me, it was always, I'm trying to develop my skill. This is for me. This is my way of training. Mm-hmm. And, but it's fun, and then of course the competitive side comes out. It's like, hey, I want to be good. And I don't want to be that guy that finishes in the bottom third or, last place. I want to see if I can keep getting better and better.
Okay. So what are you learning during this process? The first thing you learn is you're not as good as you think you are.
So
right?
That's for one, for sure. You really get your ego checked, which is why I think for me, I always encourage people to go shoot competitively, but also too, you start to really see your weaknesses, right? You go to these matches and I get it. You spend most of the day there and you're really not shooting that much. You're just kind of waiting your turn, and you're watching other people go. But then your chance to go up there, you get one chance, you get to just shoot this stage and you kind of hope you crush it, right? But sometimes it doesn't always happen, especially if you're lacking in the skill. and you start hitting everything that you weren't supposed to hit. You start missing everything, start forgetting where targets are. And so I think for me, when I looked at the competition side of it, I go, okay, this is my way to, hey, I need to be better at pulling the trigger. I need to be better at aiming the sights. There was just so much to do and learn. So before you know it, I was doing matches every weekend, and that became like my training. That was my chance to go shoot a gun outside of any work stuff.
Gotcha. So I'm curious about this because there's a little bit of limited access in the Northern California area with regard to USPSA shooting. I mean, I can think of two off the top of my head, two places you can go sort of into the Central Valley, right, in the Stockton area, or you can go up into the East Bay area, and that's really it. So shooting every weekend there's a commitment. Maybe you're closer to the East Bay area than I am, where I live now. But I just wonder how that went down. Like I think, did you say 2013?
That was about 2013.
Yeah. So right now, like if you tried to sign up for a match, you better be on top of it because you're probably not getting in. They fill up very quickly.
Yeah.
So I wonder how it was back then.
So it's funny you mentioned that. In about 2014, when I really started doing it, you kind of just could show up. They'd ask that you sign up early if you could, and then I think practice score started becoming a thing. So we're like, hey, sign up online, but also if you want, just show up on the day of.
Okay.
And usually there was a way to just kind of squeeze you into the match. And then, so that was about 2014. And today, you pretty much have to set your alarm. You go, hey,
that's what I mean.
The match is going to open up. I got to jump on it. And now, so like the local club up here, which is Richmond Action, they've really grown as a club, especially because that was one of the first clubs I started shooting at. And now I think, at least in the summertime when the weather's good, you've got about 200 shooters in a weekend.
That's outstanding.
And that's about the size of some of these major matches that you go to. So they're doing a really good job. And then the match they put on is really good and it's really challenging. But yeah, I'd say the sport has grown a lot in a decade.
So what are you shooting then?
So back then I was pretty much just shooting like a stock Glock or a Glock 34 after I started getting into it. This was all pre-red dot stuff. So, irons, production division, and then 3-gun started becoming a really big thing. Okay. So I got into that too. And then nowadays it's pretty much going back to just pistol stuff. And I bounced back and forth between a Glock and like a 2011 platform.
Okay. Gotcha.
So it's, but I'll go back and forth,
Okay. So you're a GM shooter.
Yes.
All right. When did that happen?
I made GM just, I guess we're in 2026 now. So just late 2025 in about October.
So it's a 10-year process, but I learned that there's a gap in there for you somewhere where you're not competing as much or at all for a while. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So, 2014, I started shooting. 2015 was pretty heavy into it. 2016, 2017. And it was about late 2017 where I don't know what it was. I don't know if I just got kind of burned out from all the shooting, all the training. I ended up taking a break. And initially it started off as like, oh, I'm just going to take a couple months off, and then turn to 3 months. And then before you know it, it was like years had gone by and I had just not shot anymore, except for anything that was required at work. And yeah, so I was out of matches for, from about 2018 all the way up until 2024.
Okay.
When I got back into shooting matches with my coworker, and we started doing it again. And it's funny you mentioned that. Taking about those 5 years off, I go back in 2024 and I signed up for one of the bigger matches. I think it was the Golden Bullet out at Richmond. So this is their kind of level 2 major match, local. And I got my ass kicked. I wasn't bottom third like that first time I signed up, but I was definitely just like halfway down the pack, which is not where I wanted to be, nor did I think that I would end up, and especially because at that point I'd been assigned to our range for a few months. So I had the opportunity and the ability to start training again. And that was actually when I picked up shooting behind a red dot on a pistol.
Okay. There's a huge renaissance there for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
New
especially
divisions, new equipment.
I was a little late to the party because that's, 2024. Mm-hmm. I mean, red dots at this point have been around for some years. And I got my ass kicked. And that was a wake-up call again for me. Let's
talk about the red dots for a second. Had you been introduced to them outside of that through the agency yet?
No. So, my agency is still a little behind. We're one of the ones that don't have red dot pistols yet. However, in recent times, we finally are starting to make that push forward and catching up to everybody because I think it's great technology. I think at this point, if you're an agency not shooting a red dot pistol, you're a little behind the times, especially as time goes on, technology improves. And then with that, I think it improves the ability too. So I think for us, we're behind the curve, but it's nice to know that we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I would say that too. I just wonder how that transition was for you, going from irons to red dot. And that might be like sort of a really elementary question, and then having to go back to duty with iron sights, or be training people at the range with iron sights, and what your thoughts are, or more specifically, I guess, like what were your challenges? What was the transition like into that? Were you like, oh my God, I got to get my hands on this, and then I'm going to figure all this out on my own? Or did you go out, because at the time, red dot training was going like gangbusters, right? Everybody, all the instructors are like, people need to learn how to shoot these things. And so there were courses everywhere, multiple courses a week, weekends, instructors traveling, doing the road show or whatever else. How did that look for you?
So, and I talk about this sometimes outside with other people, but as a shooter individually, you go through this journey, right? And for some people, it leads to, for me, it led to GM, right? But either way, as a shooter, you go through this journey. And so for me, going from irons to red dot, I was already an A-class shooter.
Okay.
And I thought, I know what I'm doing. I'll figure this out on my own, right? And so me and my coworker would go out on the range every day, and we would just be shooting.
Bucket of bullets.
Yeah, bucket of bullets. And I would just tell myself, I'm going to learn this. I'm going to figure it out. And at a certain point, I was like, okay, I'm starting to get it. But then I realized that I was still making a ton of mistakes that the red dot was actually showing me. And then I didn't know how to fix it. And so that was the other problem, was I was trying to figure out the solution without anyone giving me an answer, which I think just made it harder. I think honestly, looking back, if I had just maybe taken a class or seek some kind of expert advice from someone else above me, it would have made my journey a little bit, I wouldn't say shorter, but it would have definitely fast-tracked me, I think, a little better. I would have picked it up better. I would have probably not made so many mistakes along the way, or at least been able to fix them sooner. But it was hard. It was hard to go from an iron sight gun to now this red dot. And it wasn't so much that I had trouble shooting it. It was just being good at it, right? And that level of proficiency that I was expecting of myself. And the more I shot, I probably wasn't fixing anything. And then I think as time went on, you start kind of figuring things out the hard way. So we start kind of changing things up. So for example, when I teach, I tell people it's all about the way you grip the gun, right? If you can be consistent in how you grip the gun, that gun is going to do exactly what it's going to do. The same thing over and over again. And I found myself when I was trying to shoot the red dot on my own, I was trying to muscle this thing. I was doing everything, and I just could not get this dot to come back into the spot I was looking at.
That was me.
Yeah,
because I've just muscled my way through everything in life, right? Like this is the answer. We're just gonna just grip harder, or whatever. Yeah.
And I think part of, we make fun of some of the older instructors, and that was what I was taught. I was taught, grip this thing, hold on to it. You got to defeat the recoil, right? And so now we've learned with red dots and just the technique and how we shoot now, it's like, hey, you're never going to stop the recoil. So you grip the gun's going to go bang. It's going to do its thing. If you just hold on to the thing stable and steady, it's going to do the same thing over and over, right? As long as you don't change anything, you don't add any input, you're aware of what you're doing with your hands, your pressures. And so now I got a little better, and then as time went on, I just kept shooting and fixing things, but of course, kind of finding out the hard way, what mistakes I was making. And then just, got better. Finally took a class, that's where we met, right? And Jake did a great job teaching that class. That was another eye opener for me. And so I think from there, it just, started making more sense. And the more you do it, the more you make the mistakes, the more it makes more sense. And then, I hit GM last October, and that was a big achievement for me, just because I know it's a letter, but hey, it shows I achieved something, and that's, I wanted that.
Well, I think you just breaking it out like that, just kind of like the suffering, if you will, like to get there, and the continued work to figure it out. And by your own admission, maybe if I'd sought a little bit more instruction or gone to a class earlier, maybe it would have helped me get through that process a little bit faster. You still had to go through the process, but the process gets maybe a little bit more streamlined. But I think when you finally achieve that thing, like you have a next level appreciation for it when you get there, right? And that, man, I worked really hard here and it wasn't easy and it kind of sucked for a while. And man, I could have done so many things differently and I didn't. I think there's there can be a higher level of respect for that, like having made those mistakes and suffering. And then when you go to teach somebody, right, and when you're coaching somebody next, you can help them through that same process. Like I think there's a lot of value in helping a student fast track the learning process, but I also think there's a lot of value in them having to struggle through it, right?
Yeah,
and do the things. And so if you've been that person that has had to struggle, I think it maybe gives you a little bit of a different perspective, and it hasn't been too long for you, right? Since you went through that struggle, to then be able to kind of reflect on it and not forget, the things that you had to learn when you're passing this information and knowledge and, expertise onto somebody else. So I wondered, just stay on the red dot thread for a second. So again, an agency that hadn't really adopted them and they're just starting to now. I wonder how that's going. I wonder how that's going within the culture of your agency, and are people excited about this? I'm sure there's factions, right?
Sure, yeah.
So there's some pushing back because it means going through this next process of having to learn again. So I wonder how it's all going.
I think some of it, there's a lack of understanding, right? A lack of understanding what the red dot can and cannot do. For one, I believe the red dot is just a visual aid. It's just like your front sight, except it's giving you more information. I think from a law enforcement perspective, one of the big advantages of red dots are you stay target focused, right? So in our case, you'd stay threat focused, and that allows you to
ideally, if you're applying
doing
it correctly,
right, you're threat focused, but you're keeping an eye on the threat's hands, right? You can ID them, you could see what's in their hands, you could kind of process more what's going on in front of you versus like downrange, I guess you would say, versus directly what's in front of you.
Yeah,
right
equal height, equal light versus there's a much broader view. Yep.
And I think we're at a point now in technology with red dots. I know, I remember when they started coming around the scene around 2017. They'd obviously been around for a long time with rifles and the USPSA open shooters, but they started showing up on like your Glock around, I think, 2016, 2017. So I remember very early on. And I think we were always worried they were gonna break, they're gonna fly off, whatever it may be.
Durability and reliability was a question.
And I think some people still carry that kind of mindset today. Mm-hmm. And I would say, you know what, we're not there anymore. We've gotten way beyond it. These things are proven reliable. They're not gonna fly off for the most part if it's installed correctly, right? But I think now the advantages of shooting a red dot pistol just outweigh iron sight shooting just more.
So were you part of this adoption process for the agency? I wonder how this went down, because there's going to have to be like statistics brought to the table. There's going to have to be, obviously there's finance that has to be brought to the table. There is the training process that now needs to be changed or re-examined,
right?
And maybe modified. No, absolutely modified in terms of how we're taking. That trickles all the way down to the academy where they first start, where an officer first starts. Where do they get introduced to this stuff? Is it there or is it later? And then there's this huge transition process of like, if we're going this direction, like we have a lot of work to do, right? So 2,000 officers, right? We got a lot of work to do, plus the incoming. So I wonder about all that.
So, the way my department works is it's hard to get equipment sometimes because of control, right? So when I say control, I mean by policy. Someone dictates policy, someone dictates what we can and cannot do. And it happens the same way with equipment. Unfortunately, there are some people that were very against new equipment, new technology, because I don't know if it was they were afraid of change. They were afraid to lose control of, what they already had as far as equipment. And I think two, we understand now, like if we transition to this, it's going to require a lot of work. And I don't know if they just weren't up for that
They don't want
amount
to do
of
the
work.
work. Yep.
But I know that there were some people that had their sway in the decision making that were against red dots, and they didn't want these things. They didn't want cops to have them for various reasons, either the reliability factor or, you know, just because you gave them a red dot, it's not going to make them a better shooter. So why should we give them that?
True. Right.
Or the other one was, you know, and I poke fun at this a lot of times. It's, well, I didn't have that and I got along just fine.
Yeah,
why do we need to change anything now?
This is the way we've always done it. Yeah. Yeah. Again, so it's happening now. And so
yes.
Let's talk about the training process that you've been involved with. So you went through the academy with a smaller agency, you know, however many years ago, you said 16, 17 years ago, right? What are you seeing happening now? Like in the current agency and with regard to competency of shooters coming through that process, and how has it changed, or is it changed at all? Right. And what do you foresee having or should be changing? And I could ask the question, like, ideally, like if you could, you know, wave your magic wand and change it all tomorrow, what would it look like? And I think that's worth a discussion, you know, again, with regard to efficiency and bringing people up to the level they need to and putting them in the best place they could possibly be to kind of quote unquote win at this and continue to get better and kind of almost where you can impassion people with a drive to want to learn more and continue to practice so they come see you on a regular basis out on the range. So let's start with like kind of what's been happening in your time, right? And specifically in your time as an instructor and kind of what you're seeing, what's evolving and what isn't, what needs to change.
So, you know, again, speaking from my own personal experience, one of my duties being on a full-time range staff is we obviously have to run department qualifications, right? Which means I watch everyone in the department shoot their qualification course. And I have to admit, my first 6 months in the unit, when I saw everybody in the department qual, because they're required to qual twice a year, I was appalled because I realized that the level of standard was pretty low, to the point where it even had me, I would be on the street with these people, you know, and I'd go, oh my God, that was my backup, you know, like I'm watching them basically miss everything. And so that was another wake up call for me and my coworker. We were like, hey, we need to do something about this, right? Like the level of training they already have is very minimal, you know, if you can even call it that. And then two, it was like, but what do we have to give them, right? It's their level is low, but then where do they go from there?
Yeah, what's possible, yeah.
So that was where he and I started kind of putting our heads together and we were like, hey, we got to do something. How do we fix this, right? Where can we make small changes to have like a bigger effect down the road? And so we started getting our hands more on the in-service training side of things.
Okay.
And so that was where we started slowly adding like these elements and concepts of like practical shooting, performance shooting, right? The competitive shooting side. Because what we were seeing then was like basically the slowest move, smoothest fast, you know, and hey, you got 20 seconds to shoot all 4 rounds at 25. So you got guys shooting at 19 and a half seconds, still missing.
Still not qualifying, yeah.
And we were like, no, these people need to see like what they can do, right? For one, you got to let them explore a little bit, but also two, like we got to lift their skills up but we have to show them how and give them the right tools and the techniques to get there. And so that's where we started getting our hand on the in-service training, slowly making little changes. And again, I think it's just put us in the right direction of things.
Yeah. So it's about building like a little bit of critical mass, right? Just, you know, you start to, so you mentioned a couple of things. One is they qualify 2 times a year, right? And that means if they got to qualify 2 times a year, you're doing a lot of that with 2,000 officers, right? Because you can only have so many people do that. There's time, you know, periods where they can do this or they're required to get it done, right? You have to cycle them through. So you're seeing the realities of things frequently, right? But you're also, and this is what I kind of took away from the way you said that, was you're looking at it as an opportunity. What can we give them during this time? As horrible as some of this might look and as good as some of it might look, like what's the lowest hanging fruit here? What can we get them to walk away with? So I think that's the challenge that they want to, instructors, the good ones, they want to give them all the information, right? They want to make these leaps and bounds when it really is a one by one step at a time type of process. So I wonder what you were discovering during this time in terms of what those steps are. Like when you reach this realization, like, oh my God, like this is worse than I actually even realized it was. And I don't mean that to bash cops. You mentioned, I think we have an unrealistic expectation given the quote unquote minimal amount of training that they actually get. And then qualification isn't training time. Right? And what are they getting in between? And I think those are the pieces that you're talking about pulling together here. So I wonder, like, what comes to mind first? Like, where do you start this? Because you mentioned, like, start to introduce the concepts or fundamentals around practical shooting, right? Or competitive shooting for that matter. Obviously, that's going to be met with some big eyes and whatever. But if they don't have the fundamental skill to do the basic qual that, to your point, is probably a very, very low metric, dude, what do you tear off? What chunk do you tear off first and try to chew on?
I think that was the other thing was we realized you almost have to start from zero, and you have to reteach them how to grip the gun, have them understand how do they press the trigger without moving their sights. I mean, that's a very that's a base level knowledge, but people just clearly were overlooking it, or maybe they were taught wrong. Or maybe they were taught an old concept that really didn't address that.
Or maybe they just forgot, right?
Or maybe they forgot. And so you have to just kind of start from zero and have them do almost the basics. But, from there, it's like you can teach them to, if they already have a basic understanding of it, then make them refine it, right? A little bit more. So trigger control at speed is like one of the most basic drills you can do. But, I think it's super fundamental. And I always tell people now when I teach, it's like, hey, your goal should be you put your sights or your dot on whatever you're trying to hit. And ideally, that's where your round goes,
right. And if it doesn't,
then you have to figure out, what did you do? Mm-hmm. And so even something like that, I think, again, what I was seeing was a lot of the old generation of teaching instilled in some of these cops. And so they would shoot the target. I mean, this thing looked like a shotgun target. But I don't think they understood that, for one, they should be aiming at a small spot every time. And then two, they probably didn't understand that, okay, well, I was aiming center mass. My round kind of hit down in the bottom, but it's a hit. So I'm good.
Yep.
And so that's something that we've slowly kind of been reteaching is like, hey, I get you get the whole target, which is fine, but you're always trying to aim for a spot, whether it's, dead center or whatever you end up picking. But ideally, hey, my sights are here. That's where my round's going. And I think it starts with the very foundational stuff like grip and trigger control.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, obviously, to hear you say that. I think it's probably going to be surprising for a lot of people that listen to this. They're probably rolling their eyes and like going, what in the hell is he even talking about? Like, these are people that have been out on the street, that have quote unquote been qualified. They're carrying the gun and the badge, and they're going out every day with the potential of having to use the thing. And the things that you just said are probably a little bit frightening, right? There's other people listening to this go, yep, this has been going on a long time. That's what we're trying to, and they're banging their fist on the table and stomping their foot on the ground going, it needs to get better, it needs to get better. I'm simply asking, like, how do we make it better? And what I heard you say is, look, man, we just have to peel the layers all the way back again and start to rebuild from the bottom up. And from a coaching perspective or an instructor's perspective, man, that takes a lot of patience, a lot of the word is patience, a lot of tolerance, right? And also, I think what it takes is the ability during that time where people start to get really impatient as you're teaching them the things that maybe they don't feel like they need, right? Because to your point, happens, I'm good enough, right? So you have to understand how to communicate with that person, build them up, give them some feedback on the things that they're doing really well, while continually reminding them, hey, you could be better if you did it this way. And you're only seeing these people, I would say you're seeing these people probably pretty infrequently. So the goal for me as a coach would be like, how do I inspire this person to want to learn more and come back, not just 2 times a year, but so what are you doing there? Like, how's this working out? Like, are you creating community within that community? Like, are there people that are latching onto this and going, hey, this guy, Raphael, really knows what the hell he's talking about. And I just got better in this hour that I spent with him. I recognize how bad I am now, not because he told me I sucked, but because he showed me how to get better. And I recognize that wasn't very hard to do, or maybe it was hard to do and I am better. And so I should spend more time doing this. I just wonder how that starts to kind of manifest.
Yeah. So actually a couple of things I want to touch on is, one of the things that I poke fun of is this idea that we're training to the lowest common denominator. And I always hated that because then you just gave them this very basic baseline level of training that didn't challenge anybody. And so, like I mentioned earlier, like the drill, a simple drill, trigger control at speed. For some people, like, hey, I'm pretty good at moving the trigger without moving my sights. So then I would say, okay, now try to press the trigger a little bit more aggressively. Try to beat, I'll use a shot timer. I go, I want you to try to press that trigger even faster than the shot timer beat finishes, right? There's always ways to challenge yourself. And then as we move on from there, some of the drills are still baseline drills, but there's ways to challenge yourself on it. And I think when we teach now, our goal is, hey, we do have the lowest common denominator present, but we also have someone who's a little more advanced.
Yep.
Our training should be able to challenge both those ends. And that's always been our goal. I think, so one of the things that we started doing, my coworker, Andres and I, we started doing, we call it a skill builder session.
Okay.
Right. So it's like a little 4-hour block that people can sign up for. And it's literally just 4 hours of doing drills, kind of picking up some concepts.
Okay, so time out for just a second. So the question people are asking, did they get paid for this? Like, does the participant get paid for this, or is this on their own time or what? Because this is always the excuse.
Sure.
Like, there's no time, no money, right? So how did that work?
For that one, I might have to dance around it, but I think some people are able to come on duty, which I think works out great. And I absolutely think people should be able to come and do some training on duty.
Agreed.
There are some people that are just so motivated, they're happy to do it for free.
Yep.
And they'll gladly show up, on their own time just to do it. So I get there's going to be both ends. I think at the end of the day, as long as you get the right motivated people in, the training goes by way easier anyways.
Yep, with you. Yeah. Okay. All right. So you're creating kind of these additional skill builder sessions. So go back to that. Like, how does this look? Like, does it start with, again, creating critical mass or momentum here? Does it start with like 5 and then there's 7, right? And then there's 10 and then there's 15, and talk about it. So
that's kind of what I was saying was, we have these group of people that kind of tried it out. And then before you know it, you almost have like the same people trying to get in. When we started teaching in the beginning, we said, hey, as much as we love seeing you guys here, I don't want to see you every time, right? I want you to spread the word, get other people in. And the people we were working with initially, they were happy to do that. So they'd spread the word so we get more people in. And now I'd like to think that it's gotten pretty popular, that people have a hard time trying to sign up for it because it fills up.
It's demand, yeah.
And I'm happy to see that. And then the other thing we've been doing is a lot of the bosses in our department, the field supervisors, they're getting in touch with us now and saying, hey, can you give us a special slot just for our guys? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. We'll figure it out. We're working in the schedule somehow, but we'll keep in touch. Because again, I've always told people when we train, especially when they come out, it's like, for one, there's no secrets. I'm not trying to hide anything from you guys. And then 2, I'm not trying to make it exclusive either. I want everyone in this department to be able to access this. But at the end of the day, there's
a numbers
2
game.
of us, and scheduling gets tough. But, at the end of the day, we're trying to get as many people through as we can, which kind of leads me back to what you were asking earlier about red dots and the future of them. And I think since we're at the very infancy of transitioning to new guns and new red dots and that whole platform, it's nice because I think it hits like a reset button for the entire department. Everyone at some point is going to be required to go through this training, which means we get to start kind of all over. And then I think, again, just puts us in a good direction moving forward.
I love the way you walked through that. And there's some really like key elements of that remind me of several conversations that I've had with other officers that do what you do or have been involved in what you do, whether that's like an advanced training unit or the firearms training team, or it's an adjunct duty for them or whatever else. And it always starts with one guy, right? Or 2 guys in your case, that are just constantly trying to help people and giving them opportunities and not getting paid more for this, right? And not getting promoted for this, and are generally there because they give a shit and they really want to help people do it. And when they see that light bulb goes on, that's like the best paycheck, right? Ever, right? Like, yes, you got it. And then when you've inspired somebody to want to come back so much that you got to do it, you can't come back here anymore, dude. You're taking up a slot where you need somebody else, push somebody else in here. And then they actually do that. that's almost always how these things get started. The change, the influence happens is that you've got a couple of guys in this case that are they're not necessarily going against the system, but they're doing something different. And initially, like change, I think you mentioned that word before, change is really hard for people. There are other people that are like, hey, that's kind of cool. I want to do it. It seems like the cool kids are hanging out over there. So you kind of create the cool kid group and they start doing stuff. And then it ultimately reaches a point, if you're doing a great job, where you don't have to tell supervision, right, that this is what should be happening. The other folks are, right? The community is doing that, and to where they're reaching out going, what's going on down there? I mentioned this name off air. These two names, that's Brian Stahl and Chancey Pogue. They're down in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and down there in Texas, and very similar approach. We've talked to Chris Curris, right, who's at the ATU out in his agency in Florida, Good Do Concepts, and he walked through the exact same process. I've talked to guys in the combative space, Rob McGow out in, with Officer Survival Series, and Bill Brasky, who's out there at the academy at the agency that he works for. This work with OSS, and they all start the same way. And rather than going in and beating your head against a wall and trying to make this change happen, it's more like, show me what you can do. Don't tell me what you can do. And you need to be prepared to do it without a lot of extra resource. This is really going to have to come from, a passion for doing it and without expectation. Like, you cannot expect that this, like, people are just going to jump on board with this, but you have to have like the willpower, I guess, like, again, the consistency and the grit to just kind of keep wearing through it and not get frustrated. Get frustrated, but not throw your hands up or do anything that's inappropriate or, unprofessional with regard to yelling at a supervisor or telling him that he sucks or whatever else. And, or I think the other part of this is being careful that you're exposing people to what their weaknesses are, right? But at the same time, motivating them to get better at those weaknesses. Right. I wonder, like, is that like kind of natural, or did you have like a mentor that showed you this along the way that you were kind of taking pages from their book on, or is this just kind of just who you are, man?
I don't want to take like all the credit, but I think it was just really who I am and who my coworker and I are. I'm sure some of it comes from our own personal experience. Maybe we had the same one, but it was like coming up in our department, the amount of training we got was very minimal. But we were both decent shooters on our own because we did it on our own. We shot matches together. We found ways to become better on our own. And then, so we understood when we got to that unit, like, hey, we don't offer training, but we should be. And that was our way to, like, hey, this is our chance. We're here now. We can do this. And that's not to knock my other coworkers that are in the unit, and they were the previous generation of us.
Just a different way of thinking.
But I think part of it was, like you said too, is, my coworker and I, we had the skill, right? So we were able to not only just talk about it, but we could show it and we could prove it and explain where the concepts are applied to how we do our jobs and what we need to pull from it and how to become better. I guess that's another thing too, is our level of skill, because we had obtained it on our own. We knew, like, okay, these are the things we should be doing to make people better, right? The stuff we were doing before wasn't really working. This is what's working. And I think initially we had some pushback just because it was foreign. It wasn't understood very well. And then, even for us, like in our early infancy of being instructors and trying to figure out a way to apply this to work, we didn't know how to explain it, for the most part. We were trying to figure that part out. And I think we've reached a point now where, our coworkers kind of look to us and go, hey, what should we be doing? Mm-hmm. What about this? What about that? And even some of the things we would make fun of them for, they stopped doing it. Like the slow press, let the gun surprise you. It's like, hey, guys, that doesn't work anymore. We have to move on from that. There's better ways to diagnose a shooter than just giving them blanket statements.
Yeah. So they were kind of regurgitating information the way it had been taught. And so again, you're coming in and it's like it's leading the horse to water. And then, if you can make that water taste real good, it's good and cool, right, on a hot day, right, or whatever. And they're refreshed by that or whatever. It opens up your eyes to kind of what's possible, but that it doesn't have to be uber hard to do that if you just open up your brain, right? Open up your eyes, maybe shut your mouth and just try this, right? Kind of thing. And again, you're talking about a large agency. I think you said 20 guys or whatever in that unit, right? That you're working with. That's a lot of people to influence and show up to work every day, and have some that are completely on board, and probably many that aren't, and pushing back. But again, once you get that critical mass started, it's almost impossible to not see that happening, whatever side of that line or aisle you might be on, and want to be involved in it, because you can see the train is moving and you're either on it or you're not, right? And it just so happens, it seems, well, it doesn't seem, it is happening in many other places in the country, right? And many other agencies. This is not an isolated thing. I mentioned a couple of people. There's a lot of people out there doing the same thing and going through the same challenges and having to influence people the same way, while a lot of other things are happening too, which I think is super encouraging. That is cops talking about cops training more, and not just in firearms and a lot of other things. And I think some of the messaging gets a little bit convoluted and conflated at the same time with, what people should be doing and how they're telling them they should be doing it, without maybe being completely aware of what limitations might exist there, and giving them more of a broader sort of pathway or framework to go do this, rather than it has to be done this way or you suck, whatever. But some of the things that are happening right now, and this is, we mentioned this top of the podcast, was that we're starting to see a lot of LEO competitions, like that they're put together through these organizations. You're seeing it happen all over the country. And there's a few guys on the East Coast doing it, a couple guys on the West Coast. I think when you go to, other places that are probably put more resources in, Texas being one of those places, put a lot of resources in their cops down there in terms of providing awesome training. TTPOA does an amazing job. I think most people would agree with that if they've been involved with that. The point being is, it's not just telling a cop to go compete to get better. We're actually providing the training, some training around this. Like, hey, here's an intro to competition shooting for cops. So they're kind of creating a space for this. And to the extent that now we've created competitions around it, which is the one we were talking about that you went and cleaned up at and smoked everybody, which was very cool. There was so much energy behind that. And there was energy going in, and it was all very positive coming out. Nobody was bad-mouthing that thing. Or nobody badmouths these things. All you get is this wave of energy that comes off of it. I want to talk about that a little bit, and kind of what your experience has been with that. And how you think that can keep moving in the right direction, and what needs to happen for that to happen.
So I'm kind of on a break right now from shooting matches. That last match that we were talking about was down in outside of Chino in the Prado range. It was the Howitzer Project Blue Line match. So Howitzer is that clothing brand. And his whole goal is this Project Blue Line is to be able to give back to the law enforcement community, whether it's training or in this case, putting on a law enforcement only match, which I think is great. Because I think for one, it gives cops the opportunity to just compete against other cops. But also I know from the law enforcement perspective, going to a normal weekend match can be a little bit intimidating, because I think some people realize, hey, some of these guys that aren't cops are out there just kicking ass with a handgun.
When your local insurance agent beats the pants off you. That's probably a little discouraging. I get it too.
At least now with these LE only matches, it's a little bit more friendly for the cops that, are maybe a little foreign to it. I know when I shot it, there was some guys that, hey, this is my very first match ever, right? But at least it gets their foot in the door. And then just to give those guys, those SoCal guys, they can really shoot. And I want to give them credit because I came in third overall and second in my division, which was like shooting a limited optics gun or like a 2011 platform. And even on top of that, the guys that came in first, second, third, I mean, our point spread was
it was really fractional. Super tight. That's awesome.
And even amongst the top 20 shooters, I mean, the point spread was very tight, which was for me just very like, this is great. Cops are shooting, and they're shooting really well, and I see these guys and I got buddies down there now, and they're all pushing the same thing, doing the same thing. And it's great too that I've built like a little bit of a network with those SoCal guys, because, I can kind of pick their brains on some things. So, I mean, they're doing what we're doing up here, and they're great shooters down there too.
Yeah. People ask me all the time when I travel, like, so what's the like gun culture like in California? I go, I know most of the things that I'd say 90%, 99% of the things that you hear and think about California are probably true. But they're very curious about this, like, what's it like? And they're always, because of this previous statement I just made, they always look at me a little funny when I say, you don't understand, gun culture, shooting culture in California is actually very strong. It's just a bit quiet, right? And there's a lot of reasons for that. One is it's a huge state. So like you were just mentioning, like SoCal, like for some people, like Southern California feels like it's kind of right there. It isn't, man. You know, it's 8 hours in the car, right? Or it's, you know, it's a plane flight and another 2 hours from there to get to the range, you know, kind of thing. California's a big place, and it does operate kind of like 3 or 4 different states. There isn't a lot of crossover, and we already talked about the limitations that kind of exist here in Northern California in terms of being competitive, but it's gotten huge. Like, again, 200 people showing up to a match, to a level 2 type match. That's pretty incredible. It's just, there's not a lot of those. And what I've also found, and I think this is a little different than Southern California, is that there's not a lot of interagency crossover up here in Northern California. For whatever the reasons are, you know, whether that's politics, whether that's just policy, whether it's however things have been worked out, there isn't a lot of crossover. However, the people that are in the shooting game know one another, right? And they stay pretty tight. But outside of that, like, there's not a lot of crossover training and things like that, unless maybe an instructor comes in from outside and it's kind of open law enforcement, open enrollment, where people can kind of cross over, but it ends up being the same dudes, you know, the same people every time. So going back to these LEO matches, you hit on a couple of things. And one of those is like kind of acknowledging that going to a match for your first time can be intimidating, particularly if you're a law enforcement officer and you're going out there and maybe other people know you're a law enforcement officer, you know, you're not very good, or maybe you think you're really good and you end up, you know, again, with the same experience that I think most people have, including myself, going to a match for the first time, I freaking suck, right? Compared to, again, the 65-year-old plumber, you know, retired plumber over here who's just burning it down, you know, kind of thing. So there's that part. The other part is like, I don't want to physically look like an idiot, right? Not just perform like one. Like, I don't have all this fancy equipment that I see these competitive shooters, you know, wearing or whatever. And being encouraged, just bring your duty rig, dude. Like just come out and shoot, right? And the other part is like, again, creating that camaraderie. And you just mentioned it across those agencies, both Northern and Southern California, and being able to have these conversations, bounce things off one another. And to your point, like, they're doing the same things we're doing. We should be working together here. Like, again, fast tracking the learning process, the implementation process, and creating more of an energy around getting this stuff in faster. And where can I go to commiserate, but also collaborate with, you know, on how do I make this happen at my agency? And what are the things that you're doing? I'm seeing it happen all over. And like, I'm super encouraged by it, and apparently so are other folks. I'm wondering, like, on the USPSA side. So you said you've taken a little break from competition. Why?
Just winter. It's
okay. All right. So it's off season.
It's just off season.
So it's off season. Okay. So I wonder how you balance. So let's shift the conversation a little bit just into your own training. Right. So you have probably a bit of an advantage because you're on the range all day long. Right. So you have obviously immediate access to do certain things that you're doing. I wonder how you balance this, like your training with work and the competition schedule to maintain GM status, which is a whole other thing. Right. It's one thing getting there. It's a whole other thing maintaining it. What that looks like for you, like, because I think a lot of people, they'll reach a certain goal, like, okay, I made it.
Yeah.
You know, I've arrived and done. You know, but I wonder where you stand on all that.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it was funny. I wasn't like planning on making Grandmaster right away. I just happened to make it. And then when I made it, I was kind of like oh shit, you know, like, people are going to know now, you know, there's no more hiding.
Yeah. Well, as Matt Pranker would say, he said, "Oh, welcome to the nightmare, dude."
Actually, I think right after Mark Smith, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, he comes through pretty frequently. Yeah.
You know, he saw I made GM and he goes, "Hey man, congrats." And then, you know, he's telling me, he's like, "Now all these people are going to look at you like, all right, you're going to do something amazing now." Right. I'm like, "Yeah, I know, man. It's stressful." But part of that, I think too, like you said, just because I achieved it doesn't mean the training stops. If anything, it means I'm more motivated now to kind of live up to that standard, right? You know, even as a grandmaster now, it's like, it's challenging, especially when you realize some of the grandmasters out there, I mean, they are on almost an entirely different level. And so for me personally, that's always my goal. I'm just always striving. I'm trying to learn something, trying to refine things, you know, just be really super consistent. And I think the advantage I really have is not so much being on the range, actually. I think it's the training part. When I train, I got to show people what is capable, which means I got to be able to perform right in front of them, which I think helps with that performance on demand, which leads to when you go shoot a match, there's no do-overs. It's you show up, your time's up, here's the beep, and then you do it. And I think that's where the training side of it has helped me become a better shooter.
Oh, interesting.
And so now I do have to play this balance of, okay, I have to train for myself. Then I have to figure out what I'm going to train for other people. And then, I got the match coming up. Then I shoot the match. And then I go back to the drawing board and go, okay, what did I screw up with the match that I need to train on? And then as I do it, I go, hey, this is a great thing to show people too when they come in for the skill builder session or a training session. So I think it's been playing off each other, and I think it's been working to my advantage at least. So that's what I plan on carrying on.
So that moves to the next question. And you laid that out really well, because what I heard you say was there's some components of this that have to be balanced, right? And the challenge now is finding that balance, and how do you do it so that you can win at all of them, right? At some level. I was having this conversation with Billy Barton, and I talked to him about, like, how do you prioritize your training? How do you prioritize the training, the matches, the business, right? And then life, right? And trying to get it all done. And I think without quoting him, it was basically, I think his basic response is, look, man, it's a challenge. Yeah. And sometimes, like the business gets hurt because of the match schedule, right? And I have to prioritize things. Something's going to get the lion's share. And so I think my point in bringing that Billy's story up or Billy's response up to that similar question was that there is no one size fits all to this, right? And nobody has this completely figured out. I think, going back to maintaining, competitive status or ranking, like, obviously, if you want to continue to do that, there's going to be whatever that is for you, whatever that commitment level and time and money and, resource or whatever it is for you, then you're going to have to, at the bare minimum, meet that minimum standard of that. And that's not necessarily the same for everybody. And what are the other things that you are doing, right, in life or in your profession that can support or assist in that? And so it's interesting that you brought up about the training piece, right? And that the training helps you be a better shooter, and the training, and by default, that also helps you be a better trainer, right? Because you're learning all of these things and you're going, oh man, if I had thought about this before, I would have implemented that 10 classes ago, right? Or 10 skill builders ago, right? Because this is so valuable, I could have given this to them. And so there's this thing about this evolution of the training process and also the instruction process that comes in that, and that there's no one size fits all for you, the competitor. There's no one size fits all for you, the instructor. And that same goes for your student. And so when you're trying to operate in an institution, right, that has a lot going on, right? I wonder how this curriculum is evolving for you and what you're actually training at the range. Or is it just like, do we have like a base level? Like, we've got a solid, I'm just going to use this word in air quotes, like we've got a solid level 1, right? Like skill builder, this is what we do. Or is every time continue to change and get and evolve based on what you learn through each time, each part, each component of what we've been talking about?
So when we started doing the skill builder, we would go, me and Andres would kind of collaborate and go, okay, we're going to show them this drill, then we're going to show them this drill, and then, kind of build this progression. And then after a few skill builders, we almost felt like we hit the perfect formula. Okay. We're like, hey, we're starting out with this, we're going to move on, and it's going to build off of that, right? And then by the end, we'll see if they can figure out how to tie it all together, right? So essentially, we're doing like trigger control at speed singles, then we go into like doubles, progressive doubles, and then we have them shoot basically like a modified build drill to see if they can put it all together, right? And then after that one, we were like, hey, this one worked out really well. And so we started running it that way. It was like the same formula over and over. Mm-hmm. And then at a certain point, we were like, hey, you know what? Maybe we should change it up for them, right? Maybe they need to see something different. But then we started realizing, like, you kind of almost have to just keep doing this progression over and over again, even though it's like the same thing. Now you can do different variations, right? You can change up something a little bit, but if you're trying to use those concepts and just kind of hammer those, you kind of have to just keep doing the same thing. And I think at a certain point we started realizing, like, hey, the cops are going to feel like they need to see something new. But what we need to reinforce is it's not that you need to see something new. It's you just have to keep refining these basic things. And I think right now we're at a good pace where we're showing a lot of the foundational stuff. We are starting to realize like, okay, some people are starting to get that. They're ready for something new. So let's have something set for that. And so we kind of play with it, case by case. We started adding different elements. So we started doing kind of low light stuff for this one's just for low light. Started adding like some rifle stuff. So that way we start touching on rifles. So we've been trying to add a little more variation, but at the same time, understand that you just have to you have to do the basics and you got to be really good at it.
This is the part of the podcast that I always do this. This is very much like, I do this every time, but it's very much like your physical training, right? If you're trying to get bigger, faster, stronger, whatever the thing is, it's not about layering new things on every time. It's about continuing to practice the basic things and refine them. And sometimes that refinement means I can add a little bit more weight. Maybe it's a few more reps, right? Of whatever this thing is. Maybe it's changing, the positionally or changing something, but the reality of it is we really haven't changed anything. The gun only does what the gun does, right? Yes, you can add movement. Okay, now we turn the lights out and, we're working with white lights or whatever else. But like that should not change anything with regard to those basic things. And I think that message is starting to kind of resonate more with folks. They were looking for like the perfect answer, the answer to the test. And to your point, like we found a really good answer to this thing in terms of getting across the information and seeing maybe some progress that we needed to see with these basic things. But we recognize like there's not a lot more we can do with this, right? At this point, what we can get better at is coaching these people through the process and making that better, right? Not necessarily adding on a new drill or something fancy to attract people,
right?
For more engagement or whatever else. And the way I look at this is, let's say you have the same group of officers coming through that same skill builder on session number 5, right? Each time you meet with them, right, the goal would be that they get better every single time. And the refinement process gets better every single time. And your ability to help them refine each individual, if there's 10 officers in there, each individual is getting something very specific because you've seen them 5 times. They've gotten a little bit better, maybe a little bit worse or whatever else. And you're able to coach and correct them to again, achieve that next level. And the percentage of increase, in terms of skill that they get becomes reduced, over time. If you're applying all of these things, which to me makes the coaching that much more valuable and makes you much more valuable as a coach. And obviously you're learning those things too, as well, we start with the basics. These people are getting pretty good. So how do we now make them even better without changing the whole thing? How do we just get them better at these basic things? Again, I think that's starting to resonate a little bit more with like the instruction and coaching out there. And then what that does turn into ultimately is there's going to be levels, right? Because now you have this group of 10 officers that have been through 5 of these. At some point, I think you mentioned this, we are going to need to move them on to something else so they can continue to apply those skills, move them into this next thing, whatever it is that we're doing. Let's call it low light. And recognize where those basic fundamentals and skills fall apart when we add the new thing, the light, right? Or the turning out the lights part. And then start the process over again about getting them better doing that. But now they have this foundational understanding because you work through that and with them for that amount of time to where you know exactly what to say to get the performance that you're looking for, at the end of the day. And there's a little bit of running on with that, but I just look at that as training in general. And I don't know that people respect how much time that takes, how many reps that actually is to get there. People get really impatient. You start seeing really weird things with new classes popping up, or, I need to do this to keep people engaged or put more butts in the seats. But the body of work at the end of that is actually not a lot of improvement.
Yeah.
Right. Over time. What's your take on that?
So I think when I look at firearms training from a law enforcement perspective, I think a lot of cops in the past, at least ours, would always get caught up on this idea that there was some drill that you would show that was going to solve all their problems. Mm-hmm. And I think we have to get away from training the drill and then realizing that, hey, you're just trying to execute the skills, right? This drill is just to test what skills underlying that you have and what you can do. And so even if we're running the same skill builder over and over again, it's just you're constantly refining. You're constantly building that consistency to where you're like, okay, I can do this. I can do this. I'm getting better at it, right? I'm just getting better at it. And I had one cop who he said something to me once and I was like, see, that super resonated with me. And he goes, I like coming here all the time because every time I suck a little bit less, right? And that's all I want. I just want to be a little bit better. Even if it's the same thing, at least I'm making these improvements. Now, granted, yes, there's ways to kind of challenge it to where you could really see if like their improvement is a little bit or a lot. And then, of course, I always tell people, go shoot a match. Like once you've reached this pinnacle where you're like, hey, I'm really good. Okay, then go shoot a match and go see what you actually can do on demand. But at the same time, when I shoot in front of people at training, I'm just telling them, like, I'm just executing the basic fundamental stuff. I'm just doing it at a higher, faster, more consistent pace. Mm-hmm. But it's the same thing. And the drills that we're doing is the same thing I'd be doing on the side, on my own, in my own training. And so I think that's part of it. We need to get people away from this idea that, there's this fancy new drill that's going to come out and that's what's going to give you everything you need to know. But more so, it's like, hey, we're trying to figure out the skills involved and not so much being good at this drill.
So let's go back to the magic wand I mentioned earlier, right? So having said everything you just said, and I think, again, you're going to have a lot of heads nodding on the other end of this going, yes. Like it really is that unsexy, right? We just need to continue to just get better at doing the basic things and let people know and give them a way to measure whether or not they're getting better at those things or not. Shot timers, right? Smaller targets. We're not, it's not like, did you hit the delta? Like, were we able to put it in the A zone? How many were we able to there? How much time did it take you to do that? Those kind of things versus using the qualification standard, whatever that is, as the measurement. It's almost, to me, like we need to kind of reverse engineer the whole process. Mm-hmm. But I wonder what your thoughts are. Like, if you could wave your magic wand and go from cadet, right, to finishing their FTO program, coming out, and then what would be in front of them? Obviously, I don't need every stinking detail, but how would it look? What would it look like? What should we be training people? What should we be showing them first? And what should we demand of them first? And then how do we set it up for them so that they can continue to refine those skills, given the limitations that exist with regard to training time, training finance, right? And all department or agency sizes and how many instructors we got and all that stuff.
I think when you're training, I think you want to give them what their goal is, right? What are you trying to achieve, in this case, out of the gun? And then if you just say, this is what you're trying to achieve. For example, when you're developing your grip, you want the gun to just behave consistently and repeatably. So you just tell them that. And then they figure that gives them enough to go, okay, this is what I'm trying to achieve. And then you play with your grip.
Is it or isn't it happening?
Is it happening? And then is it happening every time I do it? Or is it only happening like 50% of the time, 75%? So I think if you just are able to give them this idea, this like set of like, here's what you're trying to achieve with the gun, right? This is what you're always trying to achieve. And then this is some of the techniques, some of the drills to get you there. Of course, there's way more after that, but at least give them this framework of, hey, here's what you're trying to get out of the gun. This is what you're trying to do. And if you're doing it, great, be better at it, do it faster. And if you're not doing it, here's like some things you could try to do and play with it and figure it out, right? So I think when it comes to training, like at least for me personally, I tell people there's an exploratory mode of training, and then there's a performance side. We were just teaching a class over the weekend at work, and I was telling people like, hey, if I give you the whole target, there's all this room for error. You could shoot wherever on there, you're good. And so sure enough, I'd see people, they'd shoot this thing. It's like the rounds are everywhere. I go, okay, let's back up for a second. Let me put you in a performance mode now. I want you to only shoot A-zone hits, right? Whatever it takes for you to do that, that's what I want. And so they go, okay, and then they try. And of course, you get mostly A-zone, some out, some here and there. But the point is, I'm like, hey, now you have to put yourself in this mode of like, okay, what is possible? What am I capable of? Where can I push things? What happens when I push? Will it fall? Will it fail? And then what can I execute? What can I do on demand? Like what skill can I say, hey, this is what I'm able and capable to do? And so I think just playing back and forth between this, I call it exploratory mode and then performance mode and going back and forth. I think if you were to take someone who's new, right? So you give them this, here's what you're trying to achieve with the gun, right? Here's some ways you can play with it. Here's what you can try to do. And then towards the end, it's like, okay, now you have this understanding of how do I train to get better? Mm-hmm. And I think that's the big thing is we need to teach cops. We give them this set of like, here's what you're trying to do.
It's like rules, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's like
rules.
It's like, here's what you're trying to do. And then here's where you'd want to go, but here's what you can do. Right. And then you just keep going back and forth.
Yeah. I see this, again, that the term rules, we're giving them to like a step-by-step process, and it has to be done this way. And this thing with no anchor point to what are we actually trying to get done at the end of the day. And so what I hear you kind of saying is this, like, first we need to deliver the concepts, like the larger overview concept, like what are we actually trying to get done? Like what do you want to have happen when we get there? And again, you going back and forth from exploratory mode to competitive mode, right? Okay, if we're trying to get into those two zones, what are some things that we have to do here? All right, well, first off, there's this grip and trigger and sights thing, right? We have to get through that. Let's play with that for a while. Let's just let them shoot their guns and see what happens, and then kind of reverse engineer that to here's some options for you, right? Versus this is how you grip the gun. You put your support side hand or your strong side hand here. This is, you never do this. You don't ever do it that way. You do it this way, and then you use your support side. And then if this is happening, it's because if you're seeing this behavior, like it's because you're doing too much of this. You're already putting all this stuff in their head, right? Before you've even kind of given them a goal, like of where they're trying to go. And really in that situation, if we're talking about cadets, it's likely like we just got to get them to pass the academy qualification, right? But I love because that would be the same thing, kind of approaching any type of goal, like whether it's a financial goal, a fitness goal, like a health goal, or whatever it happens to be. Like, where do you want to get to, man? Like, if you don't know, let's help develop that. Like, and it's easy for us to kind of show you what it should probably look like because there's a ton of bodyboard camera footage out there that shows what you should probably be prepared for. Just show them a few of those, right? Does that look and feel like what the academy training looks like? I think we know the answer to that, right? It's not happening that way. And in no cases, like they're finding out about that after the fact. And so what have we actually done in this training? Have we made it better or we made it worse, in the way that we've handled things? And then again, depending on how you answer that question, then any of the future training that you're doing with them means you either have to untangle that sticky freaking web, or you can build on top of the foundations that you were able to give them in the first place, always rooting back to those things and always going back to, all right, let's explore for a little bit. Okay, let's give you some foundations and fundamentals to help you through this exploration process to get it better so that when you move to competition mode, it shows up for you there, right? And then back and forth and back and forth. And if you're coming into a training session, whether, again, it's in the gym or on the range, that's how you should be thinking every single time. But the bigger takeaway that I got from what you said there was you're teaching them how to get better. You're teaching them how to practice. And you don't do anything with that if you're just giving them rules, right? And you're saying, if you don't follow these rules, you won't pass the qual, you will fail, and you can't move on to the next thing. If that's the only goal I have, then I'm just going to listen to everything you say about the rules so that I can get to that thing, and then I'm done, right? Then I'm done. I don't want to be finding out about this stuff, and I wouldn't want officers finding out about this stuff when they have to qual every 2 years, and they're standing in front of you, right? And there's 20 guys on the line, and nobody's hitting a target. Right? Or, they got 20 rounds in 40 seconds or whatever the hell that the thing is, right? And they only have to get 5 inside, inside the silhouette. It's very frustrating for me to kind of hear about that stuff and go like, it's really about the process that you're taking them through. It's not these people can't shoot. You haven't set them up for success. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox on that.
I think that's a good point though, is that law enforcement training, I think the culture of it, we've always been tied to, there's a lawyer attached to every bullet.
Yeah.
You're accountable for every hit. And, if you miss, you're going to fail. You're going to fail the qual or whatever it may be. But I think, like I said, going back to here's the exploratory mode, right? This is where you can miss. This is where you can hit the no shoot. This is
Permission
where
to fail. Yeah.
you can do all the screwed up things. But I want you to understand why did you do whatever you did, make whatever mistake you made, but then figure out how do I fix it from here.
Right.
And I think in the past we've always been very oriented to, I got to pass the qual. I got to get all my rounds in the silhouette, or else, whatever.
It's just like any other administrative task.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, it's like you almost kind of create this rule set, this boundary. Like you can't go beyond this, or else, that's bad. And then now you get, guys that don't understand, like, okay, I have to shoot very dead center of this target, or else it's, I have to be inside this small circle, or else I'm not good. And I think that's what's kind of holding us back.
Yeah, it's a limiter.
So I think moving forward, I think, like you said, there's a lot of agencies, a lot of other people that have kind of discovered this, and this is the direction that their training's going. But I think, unfortunately, there's also other agencies that it's still the same or it's gone backwards, right? And so, at least for me personally, like my goal has always been obviously our department, and then hopefully just, other departments kind of figure it out, catch on, and kind of see the light, essentially.
Yeah, you guys always tend to just do what the other guy's doing anyway. So keep doing what you're doing, and hopefully other people jump on. I appreciate you kind of walking through that. And I don't know if I said this at the beginning. I said it too, I think when you walked into the room initially, is that I get to have these conversations with guys like you, and I've had several of them, right? And they come from a few different places, I think, in their journey. Some of them are independent coaches or instructors that maybe were law enforcement at one point. They've been out of that game, but they still very much, they're very intimately involved with it, so they understand, they see what's going on. Some of them are people that were law enforcement officers, right, and are now out of it and are like, I recognized this at the end of my career. I wished I'd known it before, and now I'm trying to give back. And they're kind of outside of the institution, so they're influencing people, but they have to get past the institution in order to be able to do that, right? They got to get into the agency training, or they got to get this, basically got to get money out of the officer's pocketbook to come to this, open enrollment course or whatever it is. And then there's guys like you that are still involved, like, and intimately, like, fresh almost to a certain extent, like a lot of years left in you, and you're in that, you've made it, right, to a certain extent. Like, you are now having the conversations you want to have. You also recognize, like, this is a long road ahead of us. We have a lot to do here, but I'm here and I'm willing to keep doing this and get this done. And I'm trying not to get frustrated, right? Like, I'll have good days and bad days, but I'm just trying to bring kind of one person on at a board at a time, and that continually grows. And then you're able to share it more specifically. You're able to articulate it, and you're staying competitive. Like, you're still pushing yourself, right? And I think that's a thing that gets lost when people land in these positions, in any of those positions we just said, that they may not be pushing themselves to the next level, whatever that is, or at least trying to keep themselves fresh or held accountable. In whatever it is that they're doing. Like, you got to stay you have to keep your finger on the pulse, right? Of both your own and what's going on out there in the market. And that's what makes you a little bit unique here in terms of the folks that I've talked with. There's other people out there that are doing this. You just happen to be a local guy that works for an agency that has been behind the times, that you're with a very large agency, that could have a lot more influence, right? That could potentially have a lot of influence on a lot of the other agencies in the area. And to a certain extent, I think that you are, because I've heard your name pop up. It's not, it doesn't get past me, when I talk to other folks, kind of locally, and they're like, hey, these guys are doing this thing. Oh yeah, we know about that guy, or whatever. And you some of these people. And I think that's super important. Again, going back to Northern California versus Southern California, and continuing to kind of move this process forward, and then getting involved in like these LEO comps and things like that. And maybe we can even do one of those up here someday. I don't know, but I'd love to be a part of that if that happened, and support everybody that's trying to do it. But let's change gears for a little bit before we wrap this up, and let's just talk about the Instagram page, right? Okay. The Red Hats, Slow Gats. That's where how I knew about you, but I didn't recognize you when I originally met you. Somebody had to point that out to me, and I was like, oh, this is the dude. So it's kind of. To me, this is what I see when I look at it. Initially, what I saw was some competition stuff, and there's also some memes where you guys are having a good time. So maybe talk a little bit about what inspired that, what's behind all that, and why do you do that?
Yeah. So my coworker and I, Andres and I, we're just sitting around one day, and I was like, hey, you know what? I want to make an Instagram page. We could just dump our match footage on there, right? We won't care because, I don't want to flood my personal Instagram page with all that stuff,
Yep.
right? So and we were like, yeah, we could have a little bit of fun with it. Maybe post some training videos or whatever. And we did get inspired by, we have some buddies up in Sacramento. They kind of did the same thing before us. So I was like, hey, let's do this. And then, so we're sitting there thinking about names and stuff. And for us in our department, as a firearms instructor, when you're on the line training, you're supposed to wear your hat. So it's a red hat, right? It says firearms instructor. So that was the first part of the name of the page, was red hats. And then we were just sitting around like, what rhymes with red hats, right? And so, and I was like, slow gats, So that's where the name of the page came from. I'd like to think we're not slow, but that's the play on words.
I get it.
And yeah, so we started kind of just throwing, match footage and some training video stuff on it. And then before you know it, we started kind of connecting with all these other guys from other departments. Some of them asking us like, hey, are you guys doing that stuff at your agency? How are you implementing it? And almost created like this little mini network of guys from other places kind of wanting to know like what we're doing and all that. And so the more we started talking with other people from other agencies, hearing a lot of the problems that they were facing, the pushback they were getting as well, that's kind of where some of the memes started popping up, just because I was like, I'm tired of like, the pushback we had to suffer and then the pushback these guys are getting, right? So then we started making some of the memes and kind of making fun of it. And some of it too is just realizing like, hey, there's still a lot of old generational instructors out there teaching the same old stuff. In fact, when Andres and I had to get certified for firearms instructor school, we were being trained by a guy who was retired already, teaching stuff that he'd learned from like 20, 30 years ago. And it was terrible. It was a 2-week class. We sat there for 2 weeks, me and Andres just kind of rolling our eyes at each other because we were just like, this is dumb. But, we had to get it for the certification, which is a whole nother thing. But the point is, I think that's also part of the problem with law enforcement and the culture of training is that everything just kind of gets regurgitated, right? This is what I learned from who taught me this, right? And so when you get some of the other instructors now from another agency, a lot of things they're teaching is just, well, this is what I was taught. I don't know any better. And part of it is, that's why the competition side comes out. It's like, well, we train constantly because we go shoot a match. The match is for us to test what we've been training.
It's training. Yeah.
And the training and then the matches are constantly showing us what we need to do to get better. So then we're constantly training, then we go shoot a match, right? It's that cycle. And I think with a lot of instructors, I get it. Some of them are not as lucky as we are getting the full-time gig. They're adjunct instructors. This is like a duty on top of the other duties. They don't really get to train. Maybe they don't take it as seriously, or maybe they're just like, hey, this is my job. I'm just here to like basically do a qual and do some light training, whatever it may be. So there's some of that. But I think for some too, some instructors just don't really know like, well, how do I get my guys doing this? Like what should I be showing them? How do I implement it? How do I get past the bosses for some of them? Because, some of the bosses don't like change. So that's where the conversations on the side start happening. And then before you know it, the network kind of grew, and then, it's kind of where we are today.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of power in memes. Like sometimes I'm annoyed by them, and it seems like, occasionally if I'm scrolling through my feeds or whatever, that's all I see. It's just meme after meme. I think the thing about them though is it's like satire or comedy, in the sense it's the one place you can kind of be very truthful without specifically offending anybody or calling anybody out. And sometimes you are, and sometimes you look at those memes, you're like, I know exactly who this dude's talking about, right? Or whatever. The point of that is it puts it in front of you, and it does it kind of in an entertaining way. And I think the more important thing is it can create these conversations. Yeah. At first, when I kind of started to see it all, and this is like across the board, I was just like, God, this is so annoying. Like that's not what I came here for. Yeah. But at the same time, like it makes you aware if you might not be aware of some of the things. And I think that's the point is if it's creating the question, like, again, you're sort of poking fun at maybe the old crusty instructor who doesn't want to change, hasn't changed, and doesn't even realize it, right? Because nobody's holding him accountable or pushing him to be better or whatever the case. If he has to ask that question, like, are they talking about me? Like that it's effective, right? And if it creates the conversation, even in his own head or her own head for that matter, about like that could very well be me, and maybe I should look at this differently. And then you move on to the next meme. I don't know. I think that's productive. And you guys are actually really tasteful, with your stuff.
It's funny. I was thinking about it actually as I drove down here. I was like, there's some meme pages out there that are really
brutal.
Mean.
They're brutal, man.
But I'd like to think ours is a little more PG. But at the same time, I think for us, when I create some of those memes, right, it comes from a real place. Like those are usually true stories that happen for real somewhere. And when I post it out there, it's not, yes, some of it's to make fun of these people, but also it's to bring light to it and to understand like, hey, there's a reason we're making fun of it. It's because we need to get away from it and be better. Right. And so, as we posted it, we'll get replies and people will converse with us on the side. And for some people, it's like, it's like a wake up call. It's like, man, yeah, I was doing that. But, I realized like, okay, that's not what I should have been doing. Or, maybe individually they'll go, yeah, I get why you're making fun of it. I'm going to be better myself. And, and for a lot of those things that I make fun of, I'm guilty of it too. So I've said all those things. I've done the slow is smooth, smooth is fast. I've done the slowly press the trigger till the gun surprises you. I'm guilty of it, but I've figured out on my own, like, okay, that wasn't the way. That wasn't what I should have been teaching. The, slowly press the trigger till the gun surprises you was just me not understanding what that person was doing and how to properly diagnose their shooting. I was just giving them a statement and, okay, just slowly press it. Okay, press it slower. You're still missing low left. Press the trigger even slower.
Right.
And then now it's like, okay, no, I understand. I'm seeing it. I'm realizing like, hey, there's better ways to teach someone than just giving the lowest common denominator training, right? Yeah. It's like a lowest common denominator blanket statement.
Yeah. Like I said, I enjoy it. I made the connection. It took me a few minutes, again, when we finally ran into one another, but I made the connection. And again, like I think it's tasteful and it makes perfect sense. Some of the stuff is just like off the rails. Like, dude, you just really hate this person. Right. And you're going to continue to go down that path, and that's fine. It's America, dude, do whatever you want. But, I think the point though is if it's creating conversation in somebody's head and ultimately even between you guys, and you can help influence people in the right way. Like I'm all for that kind of stuff. And like, who doesn't like a good meme, on occasion. So just on that note, like maybe just talk a little bit about 2026 and kind of what's in store for you. Is it just more of the same and just keep pushing this thing forward? Or you got any special plans, any like huge matches or goals that you're reaching for? What's going on?
Yeah. So, 2026, you mentioned balance earlier and like doing the shooting stuff. Me and Andres sometimes we're like, dude, all I do is like, I drive home and I'm thinking about what's my next training session going to look like? What's the next, class going to look like? And then sometimes I forget, I still got to take care of my wife. I still got like family stuff. Like it's hard. And I remember someone asked me once, like, to get to the GM level, like all the work that's required. First of all, how much work is required? And I was like, it's a lot. And I think Billy Barton even said it, like you should be touching the gun every day, right? You should be doing something, some kind of dry fire work, whatever. And I realized that's very true. Like that's what I do. I at some point in the day, I'm doing something related to the gun, right? Now maybe it's not necessarily shooting, but I'm still doing that. But I'm trying to find like that life work balance stuff. And then like I mentioned earlier, it's like our department's going forward with moving towards new weapons platforms, new red dot. It's a lot because there's a lot of training that's going to have to take place.
Yep.
And big department. It's going to be a lot of people that have to do it. And so, we're up for it. Like I said, I think that's been our goal is just changing at least the culture within our own department and then hopefully the neighboring agencies and so forth. Right.
Be careful what you wish for.
So, and the other thing is, I've got my own competition stuff. So obviously there's a lot of matches laid out in 2026. There's some good law enforcement ones. In fact, there's one I wanted to mention earlier. It's out in Utah. I shot that one last year. There was about 300 cops.
Is that right?
And, from all different places, a lot of them from Utah, from neighboring agencies. There were guys I met from Arizona.
Yep.
That was a good match. It was fun, but it was also very, very nice to see these cops from all over the place. getting their feet wet in competition shooting. So there's definitely a lot of matches laid out for 2026. And, my goal is I'm a grandmaster now, right? So I don't want to be the last place grandmaster. I want to stay competitive. I think my goal this year is to just be at least competitive on a national level. I remember when we first met at the In Extremis Performance. So one of the things I told Jake Labhart right before I left, I was like, hey man, I'm going to make top 50 nationals, right? Like that's my goal. You'll see me next year. And so I definitely want to keep that, that word.
I love that.
So that's definitely a goal of mine later this year when nationals comes around. But yeah, so I got a lot of shooting, a lot of training in front of me. I think right now we've been pretty successful at pushing training within our department. I don't know how or what it might happen, but I'm hoping that we can expand to outside agencies.
Nice.
And do some of the same training we've been giving to our guys, but to some of the other neighboring agencies.
I love that.
And so again, I think my goal, and Andres shares the same goal with me. It's like our goal is to train and make people better, make cops better as much as we can, as many as we can.
Yeah, I think that it's really like that underlying motivation that probably drives all this anyway. And I think if it's just about reaching GM, it's a good goal. But what happens when you get there if there's not something deeper than that? And again, I'm just going to go back to some of those other names that I dropped before in terms of how they had impact in their own departments and how they impact other people, individuals, groups of people, teams, their families and everything else. It's really what you just said. It's really like, this is just what drives me every day. Get up to help people and help them be better. And it might sound a little cheesy to some people. They might not be able to make that connection. That's fine. It's probably not the right job for you then, man. Yeah. Keep chasing the GM thing. Keep chasing competition. I'm not going to judge you. But just because you're doing that and you make that doesn't mean you're going to be good at this other thing. Because if you're not ready for the things that you just said, they're trying to find balance. And again, balancing that all I'm thinking about is training all the time with, I also have to think about how I'm going to make this person better all the time. It's going to be probably going to be a rough road, and you're probably going to find yourself in the wrong spot.
Yeah. And I have to admit, personally, I was like, yeah, I'd love to make GM. And then as time went on, it wasn't really the priority. It was, okay, I got to make these cops better. I got to keep training. I got to keep training myself to understand how to make them better. And so before you know it, like I said, it was that cycle. And so when I train sometimes, they look at me and they're like, hey, you're lucky. You got a desk job. You're at the range all day. And yes, it's a blessing. But at the same time, I tell them, I go, hey, I'm here. I'm working hard to be better. So that way I understand how to make you guys better. Because you're the ones out there on the street doing everything, facing danger. I'm trying to give you guys the tools and techniques so that way you guys all make it home. And that's been kind of my motivation as to why I do what I do. And again, it's like, you can open social media, YouTube, whatever it may be, and you see all sorts of tragedies. It's like the last thing I'd want is something like that here, right? And especially if I have an opportunity to influence that and change that, if I can.
I think that's a solid way to close it out, man. I don't think there could be probably a better reason for doing what you do, right? And again, I'll just go back to what I said before. I got a lot from watching you operate and watch how you learn and the questions that you asked. Just kind of confirm our conversation here. Just kind of confirmed everything I think I saw with my eyes, and then had some conversation with you on the back end. And I've been really looking forward to this. And again, not because you're just you're a GM or there's any one specific reason. I just think you're in a unique situation, right? And the way you've got there, I think, is a little bit different than a lot of other folks. I mean, I love that gap part in what you just said right there about, for a while, it just wasn't that important to me because I recognize there's something bigger than me and there's something bigger than this. It's important, but the level of priority kind of moves down and that you're always able to root back to that. And hopefully you can stay there, and keep doing what you're doing for,
as long as I don't piss anybody off, I guess.
Well, good luck with that. Good luck with that. But you seem like a pretty even keel guy. And, I've watched you in action handle yourself professionally. I think you do that online very well. You certainly act like a pro when you're on the range, and you certainly did that today, and that's all I can ask for. And I appreciate you spending time with me today, man.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we'll get this thing out. And like, again, just real quick for people that want to follow, like, communicate with you, where do they go?
Redhats_slogats. That's where you find us.
On Instagram. You heard it here. Thanks again, Raphael. I appreciate your time, dude.